Kate Mila, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Welcome to all of my returning subscribers. And a big welcome, Kate Mila, to my new subscribers. A number of people have been asking me, what is that you say? Well, it's Kate Mila, which it means 100,000. I think that's the right number, 100,000 welcomes. It's an all-encompassing, broad, warm greeting, a welcome. Yes, it's in Irish, and if you think it's hard to understand when you hear it, you should try reading it. The language does not abide by, well, anything English, but certainly not English phonetics. Okay, and also, just to avoid the question, which I get on a regular basis from new subscribers, yes, I'm Irish. I'm not just claiming it. I was born in Ireland and immigrated as a child. Hence, no accent unless I'm hanging around with my relatives, and then you can tell. But I grew up in Southern California, but I was born in Ireland, and one of my many brothers was born in Ireland, and the rest of my siblings were born in the United States. So I have my feet on two continents. Happily so. It's a privilege. Okay, let's talk about something serious today. I've been doing a lot of work with Deborah Lupien, the voice of the Akashic Records, with Denise Siegel, astrologer extraordinaire, and with Sarah Jordan Hines, who is a journalist and an author. We did her book on Dorothy Kilgallen, but who's also kind of a cinephile. She likes old movies too. So the three of us, off and on, the three of them have been getting together with me one-on-one. And we've been approaching old Hollywood, mysteries, psychopaths, famous stars, sometimes one and the same thing. And it's been a lot of fun. People seem to enjoy it. What doesn't appeal to one group of people does appeal to another, and that's my goal. My goal is to offer a harmless distraction from what's otherwise a very difficult time. We can't be serious 24/7. We need to lighten our spirits. And so I've been putting that entertainment out there. I've also done a few card readings that have puzzled people. Somebody even said, this is not like you. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. Just look back in the recent past on people I've read on that I really would not usually have anything to do with. But I do take requests, and people ask me, I read on people. I read somewhere the other day that somebody that I was asked to read on a while back, not very long ago, got married, some star, singer. I forget her name. And I do believe the card said she probably would marry the young man that she did marry. But things might get very interesting, so we'll have to wait and see. Okay, today I want to get back to more purposeful topics. Really, I like to talk about metaphysical topics, paranormal topics, philosophical topics, historical topics, and then sometimes political, and they all somewhat intersect. This particular topic it creates a Venn diagram, and at the center of which there's an intersection, and an intersection of quantum physics, psychology and psychiatry, metaphysics, philosophy, history. This is just a really interesting topic, and we are extremely fortunate. I'll explain why. But first, I'll tell you that the topic, of course, you've read it already, is Edgar Cayce. known as the father of holistic medicine. And we are very fortunate to have as a friend of the channel, sometime tourist in our little corner of YouTube, Stefan Schwartz, who is an Edgar Cayce scholar. And he sent me some information. I have wanted to do Edgar Cayce for a long time. And I've actually read about him when I was about in the 8th grade, 7th grade, awfully long time ago. And I think this is what I read, Edgar Cayce, The Sleeping Prophet by Jess Stern. As you can see, I buy a lot of used books. This is an interesting book, but it's a biography. And I wanted to know more about what he was really all about. And Stefan sent me a very interesting, such a gracious man, sent me a very interesting presentation that he has not yet done. He told me that it would be done, presented in about 3 weeks. That was 3 weeks ago. Probably by the time I upload this, it will have been 4 or 5 weeks. I hope I don't step on toes, because essentially I'm synopsizing a lot of what he told me, because there's no other way. He's a very good, clear explainer, but he reduces it to a point where there's really not much more I can reduce it and not be quoting him verbatim. Let me tell you his own description at the bottom of this presentation. Stefan Schwartz is a scientist, futurist, award-winning author of both fiction and nonfiction, a distinguished associated scholar of the California Institute for Human Science, and a BIAL Foundation Fellow. He's a columnist for the journal Explorer, editor of the daily web publication, theswartzreport.net. And if you don't get it, you should, it's free. Author of more than 300 technical reports, papers, academic book chapters, prefaces and introductions, and over 100 general media publications, including Smithsonian Magazine, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Omni Magazine, Playboy Magazine, and many foreign publications. His own research work has been covered worldwide by numerous magazines, newspapers, television productions, and he's regularly interviewed by both American and foreign media. Recipient of the Nautilus Literary Award for Nonfiction, the Book Excellent Award for Fiction, and his books are published in multiple languages. He is the recipient of the Parapsychological Association Outstanding Contribution Award, the U.S. Navy's Certificate of Commendation, OOOM magazines. This was published in Europe 2018 to 2023. Their 100 Most Inspiring People in the World Award, the 2018 Albert Nelson Marquis Award for Outstanding Contributions, and GPS Scholars of the World Top Scholar Award. Having heard that, now I'm afraid to talk to him again. It's hard to credit that he is such a generous and kind person that he agreed more than once to come here and talk with us. Now, I discovered Stefan through his book, The Alexandria Project, which attracted me because Alexandria archaeology, that kind of thing appeals to me. History appeals to me. Caught my attention. And when I realized what it was about, it doubly caught my attention. What this is his experience taking remote viewers to Egypt to find lost archaeological things, including nothing smaller than the original harbor wall and waterfront of the ancient city of Alexandria that had been inundated. He also wrote this book, The 8 Laws of Change, How to Be an Agent of Personal and Social Transformation. This ties in with his work as a Cayce scholar. So we'll be talking a bit here in a minute about his explanation of Cayce's philosophical work. But first, let me give you some background about Edgar Cayce, just, the biographical bare bones of his life. Now, went online, I just got it from 3 or 4 places on the internet, basically copied each other, basically said the same thing. I have not read some of the books about Edgar Cayce, which is why I got in touch with Stefan. I cheated a little bit. This will give you a foundation of what his life was like. Then we're going to go back and talk in more detail. So Edgar Cayce, father of holistic medicine, was born March 18, 1877 in Christian County, Kentucky. His parents were farmers. They had 6 children. They belonged to the religion, the Disciples of Christ. In December of 1893, he moved to Hopkinsville, Kentucky. He had an 8th grade education because his parents could not afford for him to go any farther. So it wasn't clear, did they have to pay for school or did they need his income and he couldn't spend the time in school? Unclear. So he's an autodidact. He learned what he learned by reading and teaching himself. March 14th, 1897, he became engaged and he apprenticed at a photo studio. In April 18th of 1900, he woke up and found he'd lost his voice. He could only whisper. Nobody seemed to know what to do for him. So he had been doing sales, I guess, for the photography guy. He had to stop doing sales because he couldn't talk to people, and he had to focus on the photography part of it. I'm not clear if he did the developing or if he was actually taking pictures, but it was a photographer's studio and they may all have done all the work. When he was hypnotized, he discovered he could speak, but when he wasn't hypnotized, he couldn't talk. And we'll go back a little in a minute, but this is just a general overview and we'll tell you more about what happened. February 12th of 1901, he awoke with his voice recovered, but there's more to that story. He attributed his recovery to osteopath and electromagnetic doctor A.C. Lane, L-A-Y-N-E. In May of 1902, he took a job in a bookshop in Bowling Green, Kentucky. He was married in June of 1903. The newspapers that summer start talking about him. His name starts to pop out. And told about him going into a trance to help Lane, this osteopath, electromagnetic doctor. He would go in, Cayce would go into a trance and help Lane diagnose a patient. And the patient didn't even have to be physically there. He could just go into a trance and help tell the doctor what was wrong with the patient without Cayce actually meeting them even. He denied being a spiritualist. There was fuss about the fact that he was doing this, what is this, fortune telling? What is this, medicine without a license? And he denied all that and he didn't get in trouble, but eyebrows were raised. Interesting little fact about Edgar Cayce. He made a card game called Pit. And he sold it successfully to Parker Brothers. I don't know what it is. I don't know how it works, but I thought that was just so interesting. He and his wife had 3 children. Throughout this time, things were going on professionally. Lane, the doctor, was forced to close his practice. I think too much publicity and pressure on him. He went to school, I think, instead. Cayce opened up his own photo studio, so he must have been taking his own pictures. I think this is very interesting. I don't know what to make of this, and I think this might be a question when I get together with Deborah Lupien. This might be a question we can pursue. I'm not going to say anything right now other than to tell you that December 25th, Christmas Day of 1906, his photo studio burned down. And in 1907, it burned down again. In 1908, he went bankrupt. He worked with a homeopath by the name of Wesley Ketchum from 1910 to 1912 while he was still doing photography. He began to get more publicity for his medical readings. The attention grew. October of 1910, the New York Times did a story about him entitled "Illiterate Man Becomes a Doctor When Hypnotized." Was he illiterate? I don't know. That's interesting. It just now occurred to me. What? He diagnosed diseases while in a semi-conscious state. He would go into this sort of hypnotic, altered trance state. I don't know exactly what to call it. And connect with something, and be able to tell people what was wrong with them and what they could do in their lives to make themselves better. It was said that he had strange psychic powers and nobody could explain what he was doing. But the article said it seems like his best work is done when he seems to be dead to the world. Cayce discovered that Ketchum had gambled away their money. Not good with money, not lucky with money. So he returned again to photography. And as he was doing that, he was still doing these sessions. His popularity grew, and he attracted entrepreneurs who hoped to, turn his skill for a profit, take advantage of it for a profit. He read for them, but he was very reluctant. He didn't like the stink of avarice that was around this, and he began to refuse offers of money from businesses, from gamblers, treasure hunters. People would come to him and ask for the lottery numbers, that sort of nonsense. And that was not what he was about. In 1921, he participated in the search for oil wells in Texas with a group of people who did this with psychic abilities. And of course, this really begs the question, are we talking about remote viewing here? I don't know. Or like a form of remote viewing, because as Stefan will tell you, and he wrote a whole book about it, which I intend to cover, remote viewing is a very rigorous science. It's not just hocus pocus. So Cayce gave a number of presentations, and in September of 1923, he hired a woman named Gladys Davis. She remained his secretary for 20 years. She sat in on every single one of his sessions. That's what he called it when he went into a trance and gave information. She took shorthand on every single session. By October, he started the Cayce Institute of Psychic Research. In 1923, a wealthy guy who was into metaphysical stuff, Arthur Lammers, got Cayce to do some philosophical readings instead of health things. Cayce discussed under trance reincarnation, and he validated what astrology does. And of course, even he had trouble when he came back to consciousness. He had a lot of struggle with this because he was a Christian. His whole background was devout Christian, and this was in opposition to what Christianity was all about. So this was not something that he made up for fun, because he really struggled with it. He, under trance, said that the body is a vehicle for the spirit and the soul that waft through all times and ever remain the same. Cayce didn't want to believe it, but Lammers insisted, and Davis insisted, well, this is what you said, we wrote it down. He was convinced by Lammers to come to Dayton, Ohio, and pursue metaphysical truth using his readings. I don't know. I think Dayton must be where Lammers lived. I wasn't clear on that. Cayce tried to reconcile the readings with Christianity. He really struggled with the occult concepts. Occult. This word drives me crazy. Occult comes from the Latin, and it means something that's hidden. And it's hidden to protect ancient knowledge, because Christianity destroyed a lot of sources of ancient knowledge, and ancient mystery schools, things that other religions held as sacred. And therefore, all that stuff was called occult because they had to hide it to protect it. Like the Gnostic Gospels, for instance. And over time, the church was very successful in putting a whole new slant on the word occult. People equate it with dark things, and that's not what it initially meant. What it still means is just used incorrectly. So he struggled with these concepts. In 1923, Lammers was in financial difficulties around this time, and he convinced Cayce to work for him and bring his family to Dayton. We already mentioned that. Cayce began to do health readings, and this voice told him to move to Virginia Beach, Virginia. So he did. By 1925, he had a professional staff of employees and volunteers, and he was a professional psychic. His readings, the themes got more occult, esoteric. A guy called Morton Blumenthal, who worked on the New York Stock Exchange, bought him a house. And May 6, 1927, he incorporated as the Association of National Investigations. Blumenthal was the president. Blumenthal's brother was the vice president. Cayce was the secretary-treasurer. To protect themselves against prosecution, accusations of practicing medicine without a license or doing fortune telling, if you wanted a reading for him, you had to join their association. And you had to agree that you were going to be participating in research, a research experiment. And they actually did study and collate information. So it wasn't a lie, but it was a very clever way to avoid harassment. In 1928, they were joined by Moseley Brown of Washington and Lee University. He was a professor, and he was very drawn to this. He eventually expanded this place in Virginia Beach with a church, a hospital. The hospital complex had a library, lecture halls, offices, tennis courts. The facility had the largest lawn between Cavalier and Cape Henry, wherever they are. The facility allowed for monitoring the remedies. So they really were recording data. He used clairvoyance to actually create medicine. The aim of the readings, he said, was to produce a healthy body by removing the cause of ailments. And I don't remember if I talk about this, so I'll talk about it right now and probably repeat myself later. But a lot of what he advised was physiotherapy and extreme dietary changes. Trying to think about I think they used healing techniques that would be considered alternative medicine. They planned on actually building a university associated with the institute, but Blumenthal withdrew his money, closed his association February 26th of 1931. So when he saw that happen, Cayce gathered all of his files together and took them home out of the hospital so he would have control over them. During the Depression, he really began to do a lot of spiritual teachings. In 1931, he began study groups to help people develop psychic abilities, and it was kind of like an extended series of lectures that went on for 11 years, connecting for 11 years. His lectures combined Christian morality with Hindu and Buddhist thought. The purpose of life was to become more spiritually aware and loving, was his message, that we are here to bring light to a waiting world. He would still be studying he was told that we would still be studying his lessons 100 years ahead, and here we are. So isn't that interesting? He would do readings about dreams. He, very much like Carl Jung, I believe it was, called coincidence synchronicity. He supported the study of astrology. He believed that people had past life relations, that they were meeting up again here for other purposes. People had soulmates. People knew each other on a spiritual level. And he talked about other esoterica. I don't know what that was, but that was the phrase. In 1931, he made a nonprofit association for research and enlightenment. 61 people joined, and Cayce returned the house to Blumenthal. He didn't want the free house. He didn't want to be beholden financially. In 1931, he did create this, what my resources on the internet call quack medication, called atomidine, like atom and iodine put together. And it was some kind of denatured, I can't remember, iodine. I don't know. There wasn't a lot of explanation about it. To get a reading, you had to join the Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE. And once again, this was to insulate against charges of fortune telling. He did not get a fee for fortune telling. He got a salary from the association. It was very clever. People paid to join. He got money from what they paid to join from the membership. And so they eliminated that accusation that he was doing something weird for money. Major emphasis at ARE was that small groups of spiritual study, prayer, and meditation. In 1931, his wife Gladys was arrested for he and his wife Gladys were arrested for pretending to tell fortunes, and the charges were dismissed. That wasn't what they were doing. It brought attention to his readings about ancient Egypt, El Dorado, Atlantis. He predicted earth changes. This is not something that was in the common vernacular at the time. In 1938, he was arrested again for practicing medicine without a license, and apparently he was found guilty because he got probation. He had a dream that he talked about, and I thought this was really interesting. He dreamt about the year 2100 in Nebraska. And in his dream, all of the West was covered by water. He was a child in his dream for a minute, and, he recognized where he was in the heartland and that things were on the coast that shouldn't have been, and land was inundated very, very far out to the west. And he told people that he had been a guy called Edgar Cayce 200 years ago, that he traveled to places from past lives. In his dream, in this place and time in Nebraska, when he told people that he had been Edgar Cayce in the past, these people took him into cigar-shaped metal flying ships that traveled at high speed and went to places from his past lives. He saw cities inundated. He saw New York City being rebuilt. He saw weird houses of glass. He said that earth changes would happen. I will say that. He developed a research library. He wrote a monthly bulletin. His son, Hugh, assembled files and organized all of his readings. The membership was stable between 500 and 600 people, with about half of them changing every year, but they stayed steady at about that number. He did research and writing. They had no religious affiliation. In 1943, a guy called Thomas Sugru, who lived with Cayce and his family, wrote a biography of him called There Is a River. In it, Cayce claimed that in 1889, he was visited by some sort of angelic being. And of course, at the time, he would have been a child. And the being asked him, what can I give you? What do you want? And he said that he would like to be able, as an adult, he would like to be able to heal children and be a missionary. The angel told him, because he was having trouble in school, he was in trouble for not doing well in school at this point early on. The angel told him, sleep on your textbook, put it under your pillow when you go to sleep at night. And he did. And he did it with all his textbooks, and he went from being a mediocre student that by 1892, he was the best student they'd ever had. He developed the ability to diagnose in his sleep, including his own spinal injury. He hurt himself. Cayce helped Lane diagnosed the cause of his last voice. Remember, I promised we'd talk about that the day he woke up without a voice. Lane didn't know what to do for him. So Cayce said, why don't I go into my sleep, and while I'm out, you can ask me what to do about my voice. And in his trance state, he said that what needed to happen was he needed to increase the circulation in his throat. And his whole neck got all red. And anyway, Cayce was reluctant, but he agreed to do, and skeptical, but he agreed to do the readings if they were free and they would never hurt anybody. At this point, when he got his own voice, then he thought, okay. And this is a quote from what he said. If this information is from a divine source, it cannot be sold. And if it isn't from a divine source, it isn't worth anything. Very clever. What he did is described as a self-induced hypnotic trance, which induces clairvoyance. He could work just from a letter. People would write to him and say, I have this pain in my stomach. What should I do? And he would tell them. In 1943, in Coronet magazine, an article was written called The Miracle Man of Virginia Beach, and got him a lot of attention. Between June of 43 and June of 44, he did 1,385 readings. How many is that a day? That's crazy. What's that, 4 a day, roughly? Wow. In August of 44, he collapsed and went into his trance state, read himself, and what he was told was, you can rest or you can be dead. And so he chose to go to the mountains of Virginia. And what I read was not terribly informative. It didn't tell me, was this too much exertion? Did he go to die at home? I mean, I don't know. But he had a stroke at some point and died January 13th of 1945 at the age of 65. And interestingly, his wife died 3 months later. He's buried in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And he's always been controversial. It causes a lot of debate. He's been accused of having sort of pseudo-historical ideas. He talked about Atlantis and Lemuria, and this is really frowned upon by conventional historians. He talked about polygenism, and this is the concept. Now, I'm not advocating or discarding. I'm just transmitting the information. This is what Edgar Cayce believed, that different races came from different origins, but simultaneously. And then this next part is really interesting because there's actually quite a lot of people who believe this these days, that we originated from aliens, that at one point there were hybrids and giants on the earth, that earth changes brought about shifts in the pole and caused cataclysms. I guess before Edgar Cayce, that wasn't a thing. Now it seems like it's conventional belief. He talked about something that Dolores Cannon talked about. I thought this was interesting, that there had been a giant crystal activated by the sun that provided power in Atlantis. He did predict that in 1958, the Atlantis death ray would be discovered, and to our knowledge, that hasn't happened. He said that he saw Los Angeles and San Francisco in existential chaos and that they would be destroyed even before New York. Remember, he talked about New York City rebuilding. He also predicted the second coming in 1998. Maybe the rest of us here are left behind. I don't know. But he predicted it. But, not, nobody's 100% correct. One of the things that people really push on is that clairvoyance has no empirical evidence. You can't prove it. It's like, I guess it's like religion. How do you prove it? Other people accuse him of stealing what he did, that his readings are actually a conglomeration of information from Jung and Madame Blavatsky and the like. Others called them elaborate tales, that he was fantasy prone as a child. It got worse when he was an adult, that he talked with angels. And, people would write to him for help and he would do readings. By the time the letters got returned, the person was dead. So they're calling this pseudoscience. He did a lot of unorthodox diet remedies. Not judging, because unorthodox means it's just not typically done. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. Some people call it quackery. Some people said it worked. Some people said his cures were hearsay and his treatments were folk remedies. I don't know. So I did look up his esoteric beliefs, because actually I'm more interested in that than the healing stuff. I know there are people who really are into the healing, but I'm more into the philosophical. So these are the things that he transmitted through his trances, and that were unconventional in 20th century Christian Western American thought. He talked about the unity of all things, that the purpose of life was spiritual growth, that he talked about the interconnectedness of the physical, the mental, the spiritual selves. He talked about a direct personal connection to the divine is within yourself, rather than through external institutions. So you can just imagine the uproar that caused. And he encouraged self-responsibility, compassion, and forgiveness. Sounds alarmingly familiar to some guy I heard 2,000 years ago. His main esoteric principles. One is unity being our purpose, that the ultimate unity of all existence is what we're here for, and that each individual has a specific soul purpose in his or her lifetime. He talked about reincarnation and karma. That did not go down well in some circles. That the soul progresses through multiple lifetimes, that our actions and choices in this life determine our experiences in the next. You can call that karma. I believe that this is about as close as you can get to the concept of Catholic sin and grace. Positive karma, negative karma. As you sow, so shall you reap, right? He talked about the Akashic records, which are a cosmic energetic library with the complete history of every soul through all lives. He talked about the body-mind-spirit connection. Now, keep in mind, this is not news to the human race. This is news to Western Civ, to Christianity in the 20th century. He talked about the physical, mental, spiritual aspects of a person that are intrinsically linked and that influence one another. Inner divinity, he said, church is within yourself. The divine wisdom and guidance can be accessed directly through individual consciousness, not just through external religious authorities. Yikes. He talked about personal responsibility. While help is available, but each soul is ultimately accountable for its own choices and spiritual growth. Compassion and forgiveness. He advocated for a life based on compassion, non-competitiveness, encouraging forgiveness for others and for oneself to overcome spiritual blocks. I am eager to speak with Stefan Schwartz about this particular one because Edgar Cayce said that we're not supposed to be into competitiveness, which is a huge feature of American culture, dramatic feature of American culture. Now let's talk about what Stefan was presenting. I hope he's already presented it. It's an overview, an introduction to the readings of Cayce. Apparently, Stefan is the only known person other than Cayce's secretary to have read all of Cayce's readings, all of the supporting documents in chronological order. It took him 4 years with Gladys Turner's help, the secretary. Because of what he read, and he has a wonderful story about how he even found out about the Cayce Institute in the ARE in Virginia Beach. And I will not tell you that story. I want you to come back and hear it from him. He tells it. It's very fascinating to hear him tell it. But Stefan became an experimental researcher, a scientist, studying consciousness, both physiological and non-physiological aspects of consciousness, because of what he learned at the Cayce Institute. These are concepts foundational to all of Cayce's statements, and they all have to do with non-local perception. Now, there's a lot of concepts that are being put out here in a condensed form, and I am not the right person to really do them justice, and I'm counting heavily that Stefan will join us. I mean, I know if I ask him, he will. I mean, kind of hinted at that. And I'm hoping it'll be soon. I have to actually arrange it and let him explain it because, you know, he's the expert. So reality is based on consciousness, and there is continuity to consciousness. Consciousness has a non-physiological aspect that religions call the soul, and Stefan calls it the eternal self. Cayce called it superconsciousness. Space-time is the realm of the will and the choices made in the non-local domain. This is Cayce's superconsciousness. Information patterns are passed on from one incarnation to another that affect us psychologically and physically. And our consciousness causes space-time. Cayce during his lifetime was controversial, was criticized for not being scientific. Science was now sort of materialistic. Well, it's very materialistic, and it's eventually, over time, has evolved somewhat and has become a bit more into consciousness. We'll see why here in a second. It's physiologically based, and consciousness is not the body. Consciousness uses the body, I guess is the best way to put it. While Cayce was doing his readings, not together in the same room, but coincidentally around the same time period, while he was doing his readings, physicists were slowly beginning to realize that this materialistic view of life, materialism, was inadequate. So if I understand it correctly, scientists believe that our physical body creates our consciousness. So it all comes from your brain. And if your brain gets injured, you go unconscious, right? You lose your perception of what's going on. Cayce's point of view is the complete opposite. Consciousness is everywhere. It's the information in the field, and it's individuated in the physical human body. I hope I got that right. I think that's right. Consciousness out here comes in through here to interact here. So while Cayce was doing this, physicists were beginning to believe this. There was a paradigm shift that brought physicists to subscribe to Cayce's worldview. So, for example, in 1931, Max Planck, father of quantum mechanics, said as much in an interview with The Observer. This is a quote: "Consciousness is fundamental. Matter derives from consciousness." And the other thing he said, which I don't fully understand, I'm not going to even pretend I do, and we're going to ask Stefan, is Planck said, "We can't get behind consciousness." I don't know what that means. He said, "Everything we talk about, everything we postulate, everything we regard as existing postulates consciousness. It all comes from that." In 1944 in Florence, Italy, Planck said, quote, "As a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms, this much: there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. The mind is the matrix of all matter." Einstein believed in we were experiencing self, thoughts, feelings separate from the rest is an optical illusion of one's consciousness. Thinking that your unique feelings and ideas and experiences are separate from the person next to you, this is an optical illusion that your consciousness creates. All humans are a part of the whole. We're all part of the universe. We're all connected to each other. And the part that's the human is limited in time and space. And this delusion is a prison. It makes us restrict our desires and affection for something I can't read my handwriting about. Oh, okay, never mind. I do remember. It's a delusion and a prison. It makes us restrict our desires and affection for just a few people around us that we know are nearest and dearest to us. We're limited by this delusion. Then somebody always does this to me. Stefan talks about Schrodinger's cat and Polly. So Schrodinger and Polly both agreed in their own way that reality is psychic, not physical, but it's neither and it's both. We'll just leave that. So today's physics allows for the paranormal. Physics is moving beyond the apple falling out of the tree, and it's willing to entertain these ideas. Non-locality requires the paranormal. Paranormal requires non-locality. This is the information in the field. The ancients called it the ether. Physicists began to see that the formerly regarded as religious can be measured objectively. Consciousness can be explored scientifically. The 19th century concept of, this is a German word, so forgive me, Elementalredung, which means, this is by Adolf Bastian. It means the elementary thoughts of humankind. So let's stick with the English, the elementary thoughts of humankind. And those elementary thoughts, we can attempt to study non-local information in the matrix. This guy Bastian, who came up with that term that I can't pronounce and who has this idea, is enormously influential. He strongly affected Planck and Schrodinger and Pauli, but he also affected other physicists and psychologists, interestingly enough. Like I told you, it's this weird intersection of all of these different disciplines. Carl Jung, Franz Boas, who founded American anthropology. It's where Jung got his concept of the collective unconscious. That Stefan calls that the information in the field. It's the ether. It's that energy that connects all of us, it's a soup we live in. William James, who was considered the first real teacher of psychology, in his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, he linked psychology and religion. He said the world of our consciousness is only one out of many worlds of consciousness that exist. Those other worlds must contain experiences which have a meaning for our life also. Discrete, meaning different, experiences become continuous at certain points. Materialism is still dominant. It's the dominant paradigm in science even today. They still think about consciousness as a result of physiological processes. But the greatest thinkers who created physics and who created psychology and who created anthropology, they've come to the same non-materialist conclusion regarding the foundational nature of consciousness. And they began to talk about it. It was verboten to talk about this. Without naming Cayce, they validated his ideas about non-local perception. And now it's becoming the new paradigm. He was ahead of his time. So there are two major trends happening today in science. The first is materialism is fading. And Stefan points out it's not that it's wrong, it's just inadequate. It cannot explain everything. It doesn't fully explain anomalies. It doesn't explain everything. And the anomalies, because they're there, they validate Cayce's explanation. So about reincarnation, the continuity of consciousness, the idea that information comes into each incarnation from previous incarnations. In an early reading, Cayce was asked about the fundamental nature of consciousness. He said, dreams and visions are emanations from conscious and subconscious or superconscious, or a combination, depending on the individual's personal development, and they're to be used for individual betterment. The role or purpose of incarnation is that human is physical, mental, and spiritual. The spiritual is the everlasting. It carries all the sojourns of the entity, the soul, the spirit. This is the continuity of consciousness. Cayce emphasized the practical application of reincarnation. Deep relationships exist between lives of each other, but also your past life with yourself. So you have talents and skills, abilities, faults, emotional factors in this life that actually come from previous lives. Information comes across incarnations. Two leading researchers in reincarnation are Ian Stevenson and James Tucker. Stevenson was Tucker's mentor, the University of Virginia. We talked about them a long time ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I did a whole slew of books about children who felt they were reincarnated, people who remembered past lives, and we talked a lot about these guys and the research they were doing. There is an eternal self that creates another personality before birth, and it chooses to incarnate in a specific life. It selects the race, gender, parents, socioeconomic situation. And these information patterns that have been created by the choices in past lives go on to influence your physical, psychological aspects of the new incarnated person moving forward into the next life. Some physicists call the idea of non-local consciousness impossible. It's an ideology, it's a belief, it's not science. But ultimately, the optimal path is fostering well-being for the greatest number of people. Cayce's reading, 1929, quote, apply yourself in that direction in which the most aid to the fellow man in applying will, knowledge, understanding of creative energies, purpose, with man to make man one with and equal to that creative energy. His delivery is a little convoluted. It will bring the self the satisfaction of the experience well spent, and when these are added, no uncertainty may come to whether power, place, position, wealth, or self will not suffer. So, in summary, we're here to foster well-being in for the largest good, the greatest good, and that is really what this book is about. So that's my research on Edgar Cayce. Let me make sure I got everything here. I don't want to have skipped anything important. Okay, and stay tuned because I'm going to arrange to have Stefan Schwartz come and be our guest. This is his area of expertise, and if you have questions, put them in the comments and I'll pass them along. And pay attention to my upcoming videos with Deborah Lupien, because we're going to do one with Edgar Cayce, we hope. So I hope that helped to understand him a little bit better. I hope I explained it clearly enough. It's hard for me, so I don't know how well I did transmitting the information, but it really boils down to pretty simple. Make good choices, be a good person. That's about it. Okay, that's it for today. I really appreciate it. And then for all of you who are new to my channel and you hear me say what I'm going to say, slungafoil means see you later. Sláinte means to your health. Thank you.